All right, so are you ready for this? Today we're diving back into the Harvey Weinstein saga.
Oh, this is going to be good.
But hold on, because this time, it's not about the Hollywood scandals we've all heard before.
Oh.
This is about something new, something that really changes things. His health.
Wow. Okay, so where are we starting with this?
Well, we've got a ton of stuff to go through. Articles, court documents, the whole 9 yards, all pointing to one big question. How does this all play out now with his health issues?
Yeah, it really adds a whole other dimension to everything, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, we're talking about a guy who's already facing a 16-year sentence in LA and waiting for a retrial in New York.
Right, and now this.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, what happens next? How does this impact everything?
And that's exactly what we're going to try to figure out today. The big question is, how do his health and his legal battles collide? You know?
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? Like, on one side, you've got the legal process that needs to, run its course.
Right.
But then there's the human side. You have a person dealing with a very serious illness.
Exactly. So let's get into it. According to NBC News, Weinstein has been diagnosed with chronic myeloid leukemia. It's a type of bone marrow cancer.
And he's getting treatment right now while he's locked up at Rikers Island.
Rikers? Man, you know that place has a reputation, right? So you've got to wonder what kind of care he's getting there.
Yeah, for sure. Makes you think about the whole issue of healthcare in prisons, especially for someone with a serious condition like this.
Absolutely. But, before we get too deep into that, let's back up a bit. This wasn't just a sudden thing. He's had other health problems recently too, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. He was hospitalized back in July with COVID and double pneumonia.
Double pneumonia. That's rough.
Yeah, and then things got even worse in September. He had to have emergency surgery to drain fluid from his lungs and heart.
Wow. And his lawyer said he almost died during that.
Exactly. It was really touch and go for a while.
And they even kept him at Bellevue Hospital in Manhattan for a bit because they were worried he wouldn't get proper care at Rikers.
Yeah, that says a lot right there.
It really does. So it's clear the guy's health has been a roller coaster.
Yeah.
And then, just when you thought it couldn't get any crazier, a new grand jury in New York indicted him again last month.
It's like every time you think this story can't get any more complicated, something else happens.
Right. And now prosecutors are pushing to combine those charges with the ones from his 2020 case for his upcoming retrial.
Which, by the way, his 2020 conviction actually got overturned earlier this year.
Yeah, that was a huge deal, a landmark moment for the #MeToo movement.
He was found guilty of rape and sentenced to 23 years, and then, boom, overturned.
Talk about a twist. So now everything's back on the table.
Basically, it's like hitting the reset button on the whole case.
But here's the thing. Amidst all of this legal back and forth, Weinstein's spokesperson has been pretty vocal,
Yeah.
saying all the public talk about his health is, and I quote, troubling and unacceptable.
They're trying to protect his privacy, which you can understand, right?
Sure, everyone deserves privacy when it comes to their health, especially something as serious as cancer.
Right.
But let's be real. When you're someone like Weinstein, whose case has been all over the news for years now, can you really expect total privacy?
It's a tough question. I mean, the public has a right to know how his health might affect the legal proceedings.
Absolutely. So that's the million-dollar question here. How does his illness change everything? How does it change how we view his legal situation, even justice itself?
That's what's so fascinating about this whole thing. It's messy, it's complicated, but it's a conversation we need to have.
Totally agree. And that's exactly what we're going to unpack in this deep dive.
Yeah, it really is. It's like, how do you balance that? Respecting someone's privacy when they're going through something so difficult,
Right.
but also acknowledging the public has a right to know,
Right.
especially when it comes to a case like this.
Absolutely. And, speaking of the case, let's talk about that overturned conviction from 2020.
All right.
Can you remind our listener why that happened? What does it mean for the retrial coming up?
Sure. So basically, the court found some legal errors happened during that first trial,
Oh, okay.
like evidence that shouldn't have been allowed.
Yeah.
And the judge didn't give the jury the right instructions. So they overturned it, basically starting from scratch.
So the prosecution has to prove their case all over again.
Exactly. And now with his illness, who knows what will happen with the retrial?
Right. Will they have to delay things? Will they change their strategy?
It's uncharted territory, really.
And on top of that, he's still appealing the LA conviction, too.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
It's like he's fighting on two fronts, the legal system and his own body.
It really makes you think about how the justice system handles cases like this when someone is facing a serious health crisis.
It's not like they have a playbook for this kind of situation, right?
No, not really.
Mhm.
There are things like compassionate release.
Where they let someone out of prison because they're terminally ill or something.
Yeah, something like that. But who knows if that applies to Weinstein?
So we're just waiting to see how this all plays out.
For now, yeah. But even the waiting is interesting. You've got legal experts and everyone else trying to figure out what will happen.
It's like everyone's holding their breath waiting for the next plot twist.
Exactly.
But, beyond the legal stuff, I keep coming back to this. How does his illness change how we think about justice? About accountability?
It's the big question, isn't it? Like, it forces us to see him as a human being, even with all the accusations against him.
It's hard to reconcile those two images, right? A man battling a serious illness and a man accused of these awful things.
There really is.
Does illness change how we view someone's guilt?
That's something people have debated for ages. There's no easy answer.
No, there isn't.
But it's a question we need to think about, especially with a case like this.
I remember his spokesperson said talking about his health publicly was troubling and unacceptable,
Right, trying to protect his privacy.
which makes sense on a human level, you know?
Of course, everyone deserves some privacy when they're dealing with something like this.
But it's tough when you're someone like Weinstein, someone who's been in the spotlight for so long.
Yeah, the public's interest in the case is huge. You can't ignore that.
It's like two forces colliding, the personal and the public.
Exactly.
The rights of the individual versus the demands of justice.
And that's what makes this whole story so complicated.
We can't just see him as a monster or a victim.
Right. He's more than that.
He's this complex individual facing a life-threatening illness while also being held accountable for his alleged actions.
It's messy, it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But it makes us think about some really tough questions about how we see justice, accountability, even what it means to be human.
And sometimes it's those messy, uncomfortable places where we learn the most.
It really is.
This case forces us to go beyond the headlines,
Yeah.
to see the nuances and the gray areas.
It reminds us that even with serious illness, justice keeps moving forward, even if it's a bit slower. And it shows how important it is to understand the legal side of things, making sure both justice and individual rights are respected.
It's a delicate balance for sure.
Definitely a tightrope walk.
Yeah, no doubt about it. This whole thing with Weinstein's illness, it adds this whole other layer to an already crazy complicated case.
Definitely.
We've talked about his health, the legal stuff, and honestly, I'm walking away with more questions than answers.
I think that's how it goes with these big stories sometimes. You dig deeper and things get even more, complex.
Yeah, but that's what makes these deep dives so interesting, right? They
Yeah.
force us to think beyond the surface. So for our listener, trying to make sense of all this, what are some key things you think they should keep in mind?
Okay, well, first, I think it's important to remember this isn't just about, a Hollywood guy in trouble.
Right.
This is about justice, about holding people accountable,
Yeah.
and about how we deal with human weakness.
Yeah, and the legal system, it's not always black and white.
Exactly. There are so many gray areas, especially in a case like this. And second, I think we can't forget the human side of this. Weinstein's illness, it's a real struggle.
It's like a reminder that even people accused of terrible things, they're still human.
Exactly. And they're facing their own mortality.
Right. And lastly, I think this whole case shows how important it is to have these conversations.
Oh, absolutely.
It's easy to get lost in the drama, but we need to look at the facts.
Right.
We need to understand the legal stuff and approach this whole situation with, with some nuance and empathy.
Couldn't agree more. Empathy, even for someone accused of these kinds of things, it's tough. But it's important.
It's not easy, that's for sure.
It's not.
Hmm.
But without it, I think we lose sight of the human element. We just turn people into symbols.
Yeah, that's a good point. This isn't just about one man. This case touches on bigger issues like power, accountability, and how we handle these really tough moral questions.
Exactly. And those are questions that don't have simple answers.
They're questions that'll probably be debated for a long time.
Yeah, I think so.
So as we wrap up, what's the one thing you want our listener to think about? What's that question that'll stick with them?
I think the biggest question here is, how do we balance seeking justice with acknowledging that people make mistakes?
Whoa.
It makes us think about our own values, about what accountability means, and if we can even have empathy in a situation like this.
That's a powerful question to end on. It really makes you think. And with that, I want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
My pleasure.
I hope it made you think, challenged you a bit, and maybe even made you a little uncomfortable.
Sometimes that's where the best learning happens.
Exactly. So until next time, keep digging, keep asking those tough questions, and keep diving deep.